So I cannot tell you how pleased we are to welcome you here all today. 19 months after we first expected Michele to visit last April. It's been a long road for all of us. I'm so grateful that we were able to gather as a group. An ancient Jewish prayer called the Shahakianu is said for special occasions like this. In English it reads, "Blessed art thou who guides the universe, for giving us life, for keeping us alive, and for helping us to reach this day." Now to our special VIP guest. Michele Frizzell has a passion for Mahjong. As a child, she watched her Filipino grandfather play with his friends, and it mystified her. In 1973, Michele's mother, Carolyn, learned how to play a popular military community version called Wright-Patterson Mahjong. Carolyn taught Michele how to play so she could practice at home, and Mahjong became their bond. Carolyn quickly became an avid player, instructor, and group leader, using the rules established by the National Mahjong League. In 1990, Michele began to teach and lead Mahjong groups. Unfortunately, Michele's mother passed away from cancer in 2004, and that became the pivotal moment when Michele began her mission to share the joys and challenges of Mahjong in honor and memory of her beloved mother. In 2017, when Michele moved to rural Georgia, she discovered that there were no Mahjong players in the area. So she decided to become a YouTube creator and gave lessons virtually. That decision has benefited over 17,000 subscribers, many of you here, and over 2,000 videos. If you have not visited her YouTube site, Mahjong Central, you will after today, where Michele patiently, kindly, and generously plays live stream games while explaining her thought processes, shares recurring skill builders and timeless lessons to help us all become better players. In the spring of 2020, Michele partnered with Debbie Barnett, another instructor who we had as a guest last July, and they formed American Mahjong Ventures with 2 ways to serve the community. They just hosted their first MahjCon event for Mahjong enthusiasts, with another one planned for next year, and developed the American Mahjong Instructor Association, known as AMJIA, where they offer online courses and certification for current and aspiring Mahjong instructors. Michele has a huge and popular presence in the national Mahjong community, and we are so fortunate to have her right here at our Mirage JCC. Please help me welcome her to our beautiful campus. I know she will help us build our skills at the game we all love.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Good. I first want to say thank you to Jerry and Doris for their patience and persistence in making this happen today. And thank you so much for sharing my story. I'm not going to cry. Let me take a sip of water. This is a trick that I'm going to test out. All right, I know that you all probably have similar stories, and Mahjong for many of us is way more than a game. It's much more meaningful, and so that's why we're all here, because we love it so much, right? So I'm going to share some strategies today, and I have a question to start, though. How many of you play with a recurring group on a consistent basis? Really, I'm not surprised, mostly everybody. So ask yourself this question: has your gameplay become predictable?
Yes.
I think about that every now and again, because I don't want people knowing what I'm doing. I want to keep them guessing. So I'm going to share three strategies, and some of you, because you might follow me on YouTube, you might already know them, so please bear with us, and maybe I'll throw something in there that maybe I've not shared before or articulated in some other way. So I hope that you'll enjoy these few that I have to share. So let's see if this is going to work here. These are the three that I'm going to share about. Tells, joker bait, and a relatively new strategy called outside in. So all three of these are based on situational awareness and the phases of the game. Does everyone know about strategy by wall? Maybe raise your hand if you don't know about strategy by wall. Okay, I'm going to just give you like a 1-minute intro to it. Really, not even that, less. And it'll probably make sense in these next couple slides. So the idea is that the game is played in phases. So when you sit down at a table, you set up the tiles like this, and you have 4 walls. Oh, and this idea, by the way, I need to give credit where credit is due. Tom Sloper, I got this strategy by wall concept from his website. And so this is where a lot of the strategies that I've been able to test and create are based on this kind of methodology. The idea is after you deal the tiles, everyone has 13 or 14 tiles if you're east in your hand, and so the first wall is gone and part of the second wall. So you're left with a short wall. That's the begin game, and that includes the Charleston. So after the Charleston, you're going to be picking and discarding from this second wall. That's the begin game. The middle game is the third wall. And then the end game is the end wall, the last wall. Now, these are based on the dice not being rolled to break the wall at a random spot. So you have to train yourself to count the tiles and estimate the length of a wall if you play by the rules and roll the dice. So that's kind of an advanced visual that you'll have to train yourself to do. But the ideas in these strategies today are based on this progression. For tells, this is a concept that poker players use. Does anyone here play poker? I play poker. Well, sometimes. I love it, but I'm not very good at it. I'm not good at the statistics. Too much math for me. But there are some strategies that can apply to Mahjong, and tells would be one of them that you can leverage in the way you play the game. A tell is a change in a player's behavior that can give clues that a player's the viability of a player's hand, basically. And if you are observant, you can gain an advantage if you or a player understands the meaning of another player's tell, especially if the tell is unconscious. There are 3 types for Mahjong. Verbal tells. Okay, so I can already tell you all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, we have physical tells, and we have tile tells. Here's one. Okay, this is during the Charleston. How many of you heard, I went the wrong way? Okay, so if you ever hear that, that's good information for you, because that tells you, ooh, I have time to build my hand. Maybe I'll go for a pair hand, or maybe I have time to play a quint. So anytime someone has a verbal tell like this, use that information to help you gain an advantage at the table. That typically will happen during the Charleston. Here we go. Middle game. I can't buy a flower. I've never heard someone say that in real life. I've only heard it in Mahjong. I can't buy a flower. Has anyone ever heard that one before? So if people say, where, what was that? Yeah, where are the flowers? Or where are all the jokers? Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. That is great information, thank you very much, because if I'm playing a hand and I need flowers, then I know that they're probably in the wall, hopefully. Maybe not in someone else's hand. If they're claiming, where are the flowers? Well, that means more for me. And maybe I have a chance of building my hand that's going to require flowers. So that's another example of a verbal tell that you can use to help you make a decision about your own hand. All right. Oh, there it is. Where are all the jokers? Okay. If you're playing a hand and your options are dwindling, but you're playing maybe pung kong, where you can use any number of jokers, and someone gives you that little jewel of information, well, you might end up rescuing your hand because those jokers may be in the wall because someone just said, I don't have any. So these tells are great information that people who are really not aware that they're giving away this information, they could actually be giving their opponents an advantage at the table. And the other thing, I just kind of want to turn this one around, two sides to every coin. So if you're hearing these things, you can use that information. But if you're doing these things, you're going to be probably improving the potential for your opponents to take advantage. So just think about that. When I play the game, I don't know, I wonder if sometimes people maybe think I'm a stern player, perhaps, because when I play, I typically say nothing. I just play the game. And I'll chit-chat a little bit, but I don't say anything about the game while it's in play. I don't say anything about my hand, what I'm doing. Every now and again, I might say, I need a minute, or something like that. But any kind of verbal tell, any kind of words that you speak, keep them social so you're not giving away valuable information. All right, now here are some physical tells. Bear with me here for a second. All right. Physical tells. Now this is going to take greater situational awareness. You're going to, be building your hand and focus on your hand. But if you pay special attention to the way people move, you can gain information. Just like those verbal tells, they're a little harder to spot. But especially if you're playing with the same people, you can learn about their physical tells and use that information to take or maybe get an advantage at the table. One of them is a hesitation. If you discard a tile and someone, draws back or they say, I need a minute, that's an indication for that particular tile. Make note of that particular tile, depending on where you are in the game. If they do a hesitation in the begin game, let's say you discard a 6-bam, someone has a hesitation, and let's say you're playing consecutive run, 6, 7, 8, and then later in the game you start building 5 or 4, 5, 6 or something like that, and you have an extra 6 perhaps. You might hold that because someone had a hesitation. You could potentially get a joker out of it later because someone is interested in that tile. So it takes a little memory and again, situational awareness. So hesitation, that's one of them. And this, by the way, is a tell online. If you play online, there are hesitations online too. So watch that if you play online. Another is a flinch. If somebody discards a tile you need for, let's say, a palm, and you have maybe not enough jokers, they might go, oh, or something like that. You can see that and say, okay, well, it's similar to a hesitation. You might hold on to that tile, and later when they get another joker and someone discards a tile, and there you have a tile they had a flinch on, you can maybe leverage that and get a joker out of it. Or you could discard it the next go-round when they're not ready for it, and then they'll have another flinch, and you'll get to enjoy that. Then we have the cringe. Hashtag cringe. That's usually when you get in towards the end game and people start maybe breaking up their hand when they get to the cringe moment, okay? And you may even experience that yourself. So those are some of the physical tells that you'll want to watch for, and they'll be, where their body will tense up, or you'll see maybe facial expressions, and all those things can give you information about the tiles that people are interested on at the table. And not just about like obtaining a joker per se, or discarding their tiles, but if they're flinching and cringing on tiles that you may be wanting yourself, you might modify your plan and go for something different. If somebody consistently cringes on 2s and 4s, well, they may be playing 2, 4, 6, 8. Maybe you could switch to consecutive run using 2 through 5 or 3 through 6 or something like that, and get out of the 2, 4 because of those tells. So it is more of an advanced strategy because you've got to focus on your hand, but also you've got to watch what's happening at the table. People's body language, what they say, what they don't say, things like that. Now we have tile tells. Okay, so this Okay, now, is that like a nervous laugh out there? People saying maybe they have tile tells? So we have spaces, and I'm sure that many of you were taught during your lessons that you want to try to play with your tiles mushed together, right? Because when you have spaces, it can be an indicator of the groupings that kind of match a hand on the card. And I played recently, and I discarded a tile that resulted in a cringe, okay? And I noticed that they had spaces in their hand. And I had another tile to let go of, and I felt comfortable to do that because they had spaces and they cringed. And I felt confident to discard that tile because I thought they weren't ready for it, and I was right. So that's a way you can use that. And with this particular one, if you want to avoid giving away information with a tile tell like this, train yourself to play with your tiles mushed together. Tilts. Okay? This is when people turn their tiles. Now, there are several reasons why people do this. They'll do this typically, from my experience, is when someone discards a tile and they want that tile, they'll tilt a tile to indicate that one is out. If they do that right away, well, thank you. I know what's in your hand, and based on where that tilt is, I could imagine maybe that would be a bigger number, consecutive run, maybe that's a 8 or 7, something like that. So you can kind of make assumptions based on what tile was discarded and when they tilt their tile. If you use this as a method to help you remember, that's fine, but what I recommend that you do is first wait to tilt the tile till maybe a turn or two so they don't make that connection. Or instead of tilting it on its side, turn it upside down because they won't know. It's still an indicator for you as a reminder that your tile is out, but they won't notice the difference looking from a third person. It's upside down to you, but to them it's a regular tile. So that may be an indicator if you need to use some kind of a reminder of how many tiles are out. What I like to do is sometimes I'll turn a tiles upside down for plan B. So when I'm playing the game and I'm focused on one particular category or hand, I'll turn some tiles upside down to remind me I have a plan B for those tiles and not discard them by accident. And be careful when you do any tile touching, because based on the discard and you're touching your tiles, a lot of players who are observant will make that connection and think that maybe those tiles that you're fussing with are related to the recent discard. So try to time it if you can so as not to tell everybody what you're doing. And then we have placement. So I'm kind of a creature of habit. Most of us are as human beings. It's the way we are. When you line up your tiles, you may arrange them in a certain fashion, like jokers, flowers, winds, dragons, number tiles in suit. So for me, I do that. I might put my jokers on the left, then my flowers. But when you play with the same people all the time, they're going to remember that. And as you're organizing your tiles, even later in the game, let's say you make an exposure with a joker, that you take the joker from the side of your rack and they're thinking, okay, well, they're whittling out their jokers. And then they're thinking, they see an exposure go out with a flower, they reach for the left side of their rack where the flowers are. You can remember that when you play with the same people. So to combat that, mix it up. Start putting your jokers and flowers on the right. Keep your opponents guessing. All right, so build these situational awareness skills to gain an advantage at the table. You've got to be observant. So the first step is observation. Watch what's going on at the table. Sorry, I got to make sure that I'm not going to go over my time here. And I want to leave time for Q&A. All right, so you got to observe. Observation is the key. But once you observe, you've got to interpret. So there's an interpretation piece of this. Now this is key because with your interpretation, it'll work, especially if you play with the same people. You can, over time, learn about their behaviors and their mannerisms and where they save their tiles and the types of hands that they play. If you play with someone new, then the interpretation is going to be a little more difficult. And then also, if you play with really advanced players, people may bluff. So be careful there too. They may, for example, let's say they're playing a Kong hand and they have jokers in their hand. They might discard, let's say, a 9 dam, but they have a joker to make up for that, and maybe that'll bluff that they're ready or not ready. It might give them kind of a, instead of discarding a joker, for example, they'll discard a number tile to kind of get you off the scent that they're ready to win or something like that. So you have to know how to interpret these observations. And then you're going to make a decision. And the decision that you make is whether you're going to act on it, how you're going to act on it. Okay, with a flinch or a cringe, am I going to hold the tile? Or am I going to get rid of it before they're ready to make an exposure with it? So you have to know what kind of a decision to make. And then finally, what kind of action you're going to take on it. So that's the cycle in order to leverage tells. Anybody have any questions about tells? All right, well, I hope you consider adding this to the way you play, or maybe modifying the way you play on these tells. The next thing we're going to talk about is joker bait. Who here knows about joker bait? Oh, good. So there are several who know about it. So I'm glad to see that not many hands went up. This is a strategy coined by Tom Sloper. Can you tell he's my hero? He's really a fascinating guy, and I know he's spoken here before. If he comes back, y'all need to come. Maybe I'll come even, because I'd love to see him speak. So he coined this term. The idea, it's based on the strategy by wall concept. The ideal time to use joker bait is in the middle of the middle game. So I've noticed one person playing with what they were hoping was going to be joker bait, that they were planning it in the early game. And that's not when it works. It works in the middle of the middle game. And let me explain why it's very situational and timing is critical. Joker bait is a pair that you don't need, but you keep it anyway. And the key here is that you've got to have enough discards to get you to that middle game, because that's going to give people enough time to build their hand. And maybe what will happen is, like here, we have a pair of flowers, we're playing a year hand, but we do have potential for a consecutive run hand. We have a pair of threes we don't need if we play a year hand. So let's say that we're in the middle of the middle game here, and I have this pair of 3 dots. I also have a 4 dot that I want to discard. But I've made a decision to play this year hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the middle of the middle game, when everyone's had time to build their hand, I'm going to discard one of the tiles to coax an exposure with a joker. And then another player will make that exposure, and on my next turn, I'll use the other tile to get that joker. That's joker bait. Now, this is the caveat here. If you either don't time it right, or maybe things happen at the table that indicate it's not going to be good joker bait, and I'll give a couple examples of that, make sure you discard those before the end of the third wall, because joker bait is going to be 2 of 4 potential tiles. And if you're holding fresh tiles towards the end game, that's a bit risky to have those fresh tiles when you're going into that 4th wall. People are closer to building their hand or completing their hand, and you don't want to give them the winning tile if they happen to have all the jokers they need. So one of the times when joker bait becomes clear that it's not going to work is if, let's say, oh, I got the 3 dots up there. Let's say somebody does a pong. Well, let's see, that won't work. Let's say someone's playing a 3-6-9 hand, and they have a Kong of 6 dots and a pung of 6 dams. Well, you know that they're going to need that 3 dot, and so you have to time it to be not with 2 exposures. It's going to be risky to then discard that 3 dot, you may give them their winning tile. But with a 3 dot Kong out or 6 dot Kong out, you might need to discard your 3 dot earlier, seeing that 6 dot, thinking, well, maybe they're playing 3, 6, 9, and you might need to discard earlier. Another thing that could happen is somebody would do a pung with a joker. In that case, you can use your joker bait without even having to coax it. You just happen to have that pair, and on your next turn you can take it. Another thing that can happen is someone will discard one of your joker bait tiles and nobody even flinches. Then you know it's going to be a safe discard, which is kind of nice. It's a little silver lining. So that's joker bait. Now outside in, inside out. This is kind of new. And this is something that I've been thinking about and testing, and some of my Mahjong community have been also testing it. And it's based on strategies from Riichi Mahjong, which is the Japanese version of the game. And here's how it's supposed to work. This is also based on strategy by wall, and it's the outside in part is key in the early and middle game, which are the first or the second and third wall, okay? And the focal point is around number tiles. There are 3 number tiles, 1 through 9 in each suit. And so number tiles are the most prevalent in the set. There are wings and dragons and flowers, but more times than not, the hands are going to have number tiles. There's only one category, the Winds and Dragons category, which has few number tiles, but all the rest use number tiles. The most flexible on the card, or consecutive run, by the way, is the most flexible on the card because there are 3 suits. And the 1, 2, 3, and 7, 8, 9 on the ends of the sequences are limited because you can only move from the edge up or the edge down, which means 4, 5, and 6 are the most flexible numbers in the set. So the idea is that exposures are more likely going to be using 4, 5, 6. With that in mind, what you want to do is discard, if you don't need them, 1, 2, 3, and 9, 8, 7 in that order, and hoard 4, 5, 6. Because more likely than not, you're going to see exposures with jokers using 4, 5, and 6. And you could potentially get a joker out of that 4, 5, 6 single tiles. This requires a lot of situational awareness. And also, of course, you have to consider your own hand. If you're playing a consecutive run hand with big numbers, you're not going to discard 9, 8, 7. You're going to keep them, and then you'll be focused on discarding little numbers. So the idea is to hold the most efficient tiles for potential joker exchanges. Now, if somebody has, let's say that you're keeping 4, 5, 6, and someone has a pung of 4 cracks, and you have a 4 crack, well, then you know that's going to be a discard. So you can kind of escalate those efficient tiles based on what's happening at the table, which is why this is an advanced strategy, because it takes great situational awareness. But many of us have found success using this theory. With outside in, the first part of the concept, you want to make sure that you use that focus through the third wall. Because in the end game, you have to decide if you're going to play to win. If you are going to play to win, you don't want to be, you want to discard your freshest tiles first those are going to be the riskiest ones. So you may end up with 4, 5, 6 fresh tiles. You want to try to discard those before the end of the third wall. So at the fourth wall, you've got to decide, do I want to play to win or do I want to fold? Meaning break up my hand. And if you're going to break up your hand, you want to hold those fresh tiles instead. So these are those considerations. 4, 5, 6 would be very efficient tiles, most likely used, and if they're fresh, they're going to be very risky to discard in the end game. Also, dragons are risky because there are fewer of them. And then flowers, of course, very risky to discard in the fourth wall. And then if you are folding, discard those jokers. And don't make exposures. If you know you're not going to win, don't make any exposures. Just break up your hand and discard as safely as possible. Okay, so anybody have any questions about the outside in, inside out? The idea here with the inside out is if you are playing to win, you're going to discard your riskiest tiles first. So whatever, like let's say I have a 4 crack and there's 1 out, that's going to be a pretty risky discard. But if I'm playing to win and that's the riskiest tile I have in my hand, I want to get it out as early as possible if I'm playing to win. And that's when you start discarding inside out, because they're the most risky. So you start discarding 4, 5, and 6, and then you move to the outside, which are probably either out or not as likely going to be used in hand. So it's a little out there, I know. Does this theory make anybody cringe? It is a little weird, I know. But I've been having a lot of fun testing it out, and I hope that you think about the way you play the game, and then you'll consider all these strategies, and maybe even test one out today. All right, we're going to open this up to, I'll share where you can find me in a minute. Actually, let me do this first. So I have a YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube if you type either Michele Frizzell or you type Mahjong Central. You'll find me. You can even Google me, and you'll find me that way as well. Also, I have a Facebook group, and we do a lot of communication on that group. I put up anytime I do an event or live stream, I post it on YouTube, and I'll put the repost link on there and things like that. And when I release videos, I do recurring videos Monday, Wednesday, and then live streams on Fridays, and I'll post those on my Facebook page so you can find them easily. If you don't use Facebook, just go straight to YouTube. And then I have a website also, and that's mahjongcentral.com. And on there, if you go to styles, you'll find links to American Mahjong tools, one of them being the solitaire version. Does anyone play solitaire Mahjong with their Mahjong tiles? I have videos on how to play by yourself, and there's a Charleston helper there that can help you keep track of the Charleston when you're playing 4 hands at once. It's a lot of fun. And I have wrecked many games by not tracking it right, so it is really fun. Okay, so also, Doris mentioned that I went into business with my friend Debbie Barnett. She lives at the Villages, and we decided to join our teaching experience, and we created AMGIA, which stands for American Mahjong Instructor Association, and we do education and certification for both aspiring and current instructors. So if you teach, consider visiting AMGIA to learn about the services we offer. We're very big on camaraderie and support, but also we do have the ability for you to get certified, which can help give you some visibility and credibility. And we have other things on there. We have a directory, and we're trying to also have instructors who want to speak, kind of like what I'm doing right here. So we'll have a directory of instructors who want to speak. Let's see, and then we also have MahjCon. This is the most exciting thing. So MahjCon is conferences for Mahjong enthusiasts. And this is brand new. We did our first event last year, and man, we were crazy launching a business during a pandemic, but we did it anyway. And we had a very small contingent of brave individuals who came out for our first MahjCon, and we had a great time. We had 63 people join us at Lake Mary in Orlando, Florida, and we had a fantastic time. This is what we're planning for 2022. We're going to be in Boca Raton. So if any of you like to travel and like to go to Florida, please consider joining us in Boca Raton. We're hoping to have about 150 people at this particular event. And let's have Q&A. I think that we have a little bit of time. 5 minutes? Oh, yes, I'm sure. So, yeah, we have about 5 minutes if anybody would like to ask me anything. Okay.
Oh boy, I'm going to be running around.
In your opinion, how much of the game is luck?
Okay, I love this question actually, and it's a very controversial topic. Do any of you use Mahjong That's It Facebook group? It's a Mahjong That's It Facebook group. It's huge. It's got like 35,000 members, and there are amazing conversations that go on there. And this particular question comes up often. And you know, a lot of instructors and community leaders have different ideas on this. And here's mine. I think it depends. How's that for an answer? So the idea is really, for me, that it really depends on how long you've been playing the game. So there's a spectrum. On the spectrum, we have beginners, and then we have experienced players. When you're a beginner, you're just learning the fundamentals of the game, and you probably haven't learned strategies or joker bait or anything like that, and you're really just aware of your own hand. So you have a higher luck factor. You know, if you draw the tiles and you happen to build your hand with very little experience, you're going to experience a lot of luck. But the more that you get to that advanced side or experienced side of the spectrum, the more time that you have had to learn how to use tells at the table, situational awareness, strategies. You can use so much more information based on your experience, and those skills kind of mitigate that luck factor, and so you have much more skill-based decision-making than you do relying on luck. So for me, I would say, for example, if I would have to pick a number, beginner, maybe they're going to have 75% luck factor. But for an advanced player, I say 25%, because they're going to have so many skills and so much experience that they're going to be able to use to help them make smart decisions. So not so much luck, it's skill. This is a game of skill. It's complex. So it takes skill to master, and time.
Thank you. I wanted to state that I just recently started teaching at a senior center, and I joined the institute and got your materials. It was wonderful, very helpful.
Good, thank
And
you.
the question I have is, you were talking about throwing in your hand and doing it on the inside out, outside in, by the fourth wall. Do you have kind of a guideline on when you should decide, okay, this is, throwing it in or not?
Yeah, that's great. And it really is going to be based on what's happened at the table. You want to look at variables. The variables are the tiles that have been discarded, the tiles in exposures, of course the tiles in your hand, and the type of tile you need to win. If you need a pair, and one is out and maybe one is in exposure with a joker, it's more likely in the end game that you're going to get pretty lucky to get that one tile, especially if you still have other tiles that you need in your hand. You need to continue building in the fourth game or the fourth wall. Another thing that you could do is say 4 tiles or less at the beginning of the fourth wall is kind of a indicator. Maybe 3 tiles or less, because if you think about it, depending on if you break the wall or not, and you look at that fourth wall, you count your number of discards and see how many tile or how many blocks of 4 there are, because you're going to get one of those 4 if people don't claim a discard. So you'll count your discards and estimate how many picks you'll have, and if you have fewer discards than picks, play to win. But if you have more discards than picks, you might want to break up your hand. So it's kind of a mixture of the variables, how many discards you have, how many picks you have left, and you also have to kind of figure out what everybody is playing, and if your particular tiles that you need are commodities, you may not get them. If you're playing a 2, 4, 6, 8 hand and someone's going for 3, 6, 9 and you need a 6, and there are 6s out or something, you might think, my chances are pretty minimal because someone's in 3, 6, 9 or something like that. So you really have to think about what's out. Lots of variables.
We have time for one more.
Okay. I'll catch up wherever we go. Oh,
Hi.
Oh, there we go.
There's been some controversy concerning when a tile is thrown out on the table and someone wants to say, I call that tile.
Yes.
We in our group, if I rack it right away, if I pick a tile and rack it, then you cannot get it.
Yeah.
But if they pick a tile, someone goes to pick a tile, but then someone calls it, we let them do it. Is that incorrect?
Okay, so this is really complicated. And does everyone know about Mahjong Made Easy, the little booklet the league writes that has their little booklet of, they call them guidelines. They don't even really come out and say that they're rules, although there are rules in there. It's really a book of guidelines. But they have a page dedicated to that concept, that whole topic. And this, the idea is, firstly, the league envisions that this game is played in homes with friends. Okay? So, yeah, there's the whole controversy that goes along with this, or debate about being a friendly game versus a competitive game versus tournament rules, and, do you let bygones be bygones? Do you give a little grace to new players and all that? Well, first you consider, are you playing with your friends, or are you playing in a competitive environment? If you're playing in a competitive environment, play by the rules, and the rules are that if somebody racks their pick and you have not indicated that you're interested in that previous discard, it's too late. That rack, just any previous discard is done. But let's say that you're playing with friends and your friend, I have a really good friend who had a stroke, and she's a little slower to think. And so, I would put my tile back and let her have the dang tile, So, excuse me for using sort of a cuss word there. You just have to decide in your group how you want to do it. But the rule is, if you rack it, that discard is no longer available.
But if you just pick it,
You have to rack it. You can't, even if you pick it and look at it, doesn't matter. You have to rack it. And racking, by the way, is not tapping. Like, you don't tap it on the flat part of your rack. You have to actually sit it in with your other tiles. That's racking, okay? So if you tap, that don't count. The click, that little click, doesn't count. You gotta rack it with your other tiles. Now, also, just one last thing, and I'm sure everyone's probably gonna be hungry and want to maybe win a prize, that try to count to 3 in your head before you pick. Give people a little bit of time to figure out whether or not they want that tile, and count to, I usually count to 3 in my head. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope that you try out some of these advanced strategies. Thank you so much.